All right, welcome everyone. Today we're diving into a really fascinating theological argument. It suggests a deep prophetic link between Jesus Christ and one of Israel's so-called lost tribes. And honestly, it's an idea that might just change the way you see some very, very familiar stories.
So let's just start with the central question here. Is it possible there's a hidden identity for Jesus in the Old Testament, one that's specifically tied to the destiny of Israel's northern kingdom, the lost tribes? Well, the view we're looking at today argues that the answer is a huge yes.
So here's the main idea we're exploring. The argument is that Jesus isn't just a descendant of Judah. No. He's also the ultimate prophetic fulfillment, the fulfillment of the blessings, the role, and the entire destiny that was assigned to the tribe of Ephraim.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the prophetic connection. Then, we'll get into the genealogical evidence. After that, we'll see how it shows up in Jesus' own ministry, how the church fits into all this as Ephraim, and finally, how it all leads to this idea of two harvests, but one single kingdom. Okay, let's jump right in. First up, the prophetic connection. You know, this whole argument really hangs on one big idea, that Jesus' identity is deeply, deeply tied to the destiny of Ephraim. You remember, the leading tribe of Israel's northern kingdom. All right, now for the genealogical evidence. And you know, the first major piece of evidence that this view presents comes from a place you might not expect at all. It actually comes from what looks like a flat-out contradiction in the genealogies of Jesus' earthly father Joseph.
So you look at Matthew's account and it says Joseph is the son of Jacob. Simple enough. But then you flip over to Luke and it says he's the son of Heli. So which one is it? Well, the view we're looking at today says they're both prophetically true, that this contradiction isn't a mistake at all. It's actually a key that unlocks a much deeper meaning.
So the key to this whole thing, according to this interpretation, is that name Heli. The argument goes that in Greek, Heli is connected to Elios, the word for son. And believe me, that connection to the son is where this whole thing gets really, really interesting.
But why does the sun even matter? Well, for that, we have to go all the way back to Joseph's famous dream in the Old Testament. Remember that? He dreamt the sun, moon, and stars were bowing to him. And when he told his father Jacob, Jacob immediately interprets it. He asks, "Will your mother and I?" And right there, he explicitly identifies himself, Jacob, as the son in that prophecy.
So you can see the logic they're laying out, right? Step 1, Luke calls Joseph the son of Heli. Step 2, Heli is interpreted as son. Step 3, in that old prophecy, Jacob is the son. So putting it all together, son of Heli prophetically means son of Jacob. This means both genealogies actually point to Jacob, which forges this incredible direct link from Jesus, through his father Joseph, all the way back to the line of Joseph's son, Ephraim.
Okay, so that's the genealogy piece. Now let's look at the second pillar of this argument, which moves into the titles and the actions of Jesus himself during his ministry on earth.
If we go back to Genesis 49, Jacob is on his deathbed giving his final blessings to his sons. And the one he gives to Joseph is totally unique. He talks about a future figure coming from Joseph's line who will be the shepherd, the stone of Israel. I mean, that's a super specific messianic title, and it's tied directly to the house of Joseph.
And this is where a huge connection is made. We all know Jesus is called the cornerstone all over the New Testament. Well, the argument here is that this isn't some new title that just appeared out of nowhere. It's the direct fulfillment of that very specific Stone of Israel promise that was made to Joseph's descendants.
And then there's this really powerful, symbolic moment in John's Gospel. Right after the leaders from the house of Judah conspire to kill him, where does Jesus go? It says he retreats to a town specifically named Ephraim. I mean, the symbolism there is just so potent. He's rejected by Judah, so he literally turns toward Ephraim. Okay, so from here, the argument really starts to broaden out. It moves from Jesus as an individual to the entire collective body of believers, the church, as the spiritual restoration of Ephraim. So let's do a quick history refresher, just to set the stage. Remember, the northern kingdom of Israel, it was led by the most powerful tribe, Ephraim, and they were conquered by the Assyrians. Their people were completely scattered among the nations, among the Gentiles, and they basically became known to history as the 10 lost tribes. So this piece of history really sets up a pivotal question. When we see the New Testament mission to the Gentiles, is that a totally brand new plan? Or could it be the fulfillment of all those Old Testament prophecies about God gathering the lost sheep of the house of Israel? Those scattered descendants of Ephraim. And that right there is the core theory. From this particular viewpoint, the entire church age, this incredible gathering of believers from every single nation, it isn't a replacement for Israel. Instead, it is the prophetic restoration of the northern kingdom. It's Ephraim being gathered back from the very places they were scattered to all those centuries ago.
So, where does this all lead? Well, it culminates in this really grand vision of God's redemptive plan for history, a plan that unfolds in two very distinct phases, or as this view calls them, two great harvests.
The first harvest is what we're in right now. It's seen as the harvest of Ephraim, which is the gathering of the fullness of the Gentiles. But that's not the end of the story. This is supposed to be followed by a future harvest, the harvest of Judah, which will focus specifically on the southern kingdom, the Jewish people.
Now, this whole two-part plan is seen as the ultimate fulfillment of that famous two sticks prophecy you read about in Ezekiel 37. You remember, the prophet is told to take one stick, and that stick represents Judah, the southern kingdom. And then he's told to take a second stick. This one is called the stick of Joseph, and it's for Ephraim. So in this view, that second stick is symbolic. It represents the northern kingdom, which is now being restored through the church.
And what's the ultimate goal of all this? Well, God says it himself, loud and clear. He's going to take these two sticks, Judah and Ephraim, and he's going to join them together and make them one single stick, completely unified in his hand.
So, the end result of these two great harvests is the ultimate reunification of all of Israel. They're no longer two divided, separate houses. Instead, they become one nation, under one king and one shepherd, Jesus Christ, who is seen as the rightful heir and the ultimate fulfillment of both Judah and Ephraim.
So that leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. What if the story of the lost tribes isn't really about a group of people who just vanished from history? What if instead it's about a prophecy that was just waiting to be found and fulfilled in the person of Jesus and in the story of his church? It's a pretty compelling way to look at a very, very old story, isn't it?